Hi, and welcome to another episode of Kuntarkis. My name is Michael Yon, and this episode is the positive and negative aspects of genetic transfer from parent to child. So, welcome, Kuntarkis, and take us away.
Thank you, Michael. It's a really hard thing, Michael, to express truth because what I'm about to say may offend a lot of parents. Some may say, "Oh my God, that's just so true." Others will say, "Oh, what a load of rubbish." Everybody on this planet thinks differently because of one thing, conditioning, which eventually becomes your belief system. That's a good thing to a point, but it's also a very deep negative thing on the other side because most people are fearful in their own existence as a human being. They have experienced many negative aspects throughout life. And they got to ask themselves, why? Why do we as a race, if we believe in karma, if we believe in reincarnation, then why is it we experience such negative aspects throughout our life? And most of us will never ever question the genetics of our parents. We'll say society, simply life. Yeah, part of that is true. But the real essence is what's within the DNA of our parents when they're intimate and the female, being the woman, falls pregnant and has a child or two or three or four or five or more. The funny thing is, if a parent looks at those children as they're growing up, they will see different aspects of their character. One may be quiet, one may be rowdy, or two may be really rowdy, or they may all be rowdy. We can't estimate or judge that. That's part of what life is all about. But the most interesting factor, when I lived on Nakaris and I was a scientist doctor, for 3 incarnations, one after the other, because Nakarons have the very unique ability to know their past life and to recall on any of their past lives that may help them in the present for whatever reason. It may be positive, it may be negative. The point is, I researched the Nakaron chemical system of the Nakaron body, and I spent what we would say here years, because there's no time factor on Nakaris. I spent many, 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 many years of that lifetime, 3 of them, to actually create a program which I've already stated. Now, I discovered how the entire Nakaron system functions emotionally, mentally, spiritually, physically, even with the mind, the limitations that can be set on the mind from the human brain. With Nikarons, it wasn't so bad because they weren't a warring nation. They weren't carnivores. They didn't have the genetics from dead animals based on fear of being slaughtered. That plays one of the most biggest issues within the human chemical structure. But the other side is all the characteristics and life's experiences that are within the parents of that child, or 2 or 3 or 5, plus also the grandparents, great-grandparents, great-great-great-grandparents. It all passes down the line. And it passes down with many different aspects of those characters. It can be like the grandfather died of cancer at 50. The son, who's now the father who had children, he died at 50. It's what they call a condition. It's a flaw in human evolution when it comes to what is passed down. For instance, if the father, say, was a murderer, a mass murderer, and he has 4 children, you'll find the characters within those 4 children can be really unusual. And when I say unusual, I mean they may develop into a narcissist. And I'll tell you the reason why. People will say, oh, what a load of rubbish. I'm sorry, it's 100% true. The thing is, on this planet today, we have millions of narcissists in our evolution at this moment. And all those ones that are creating the dilemma to depopulate humanity, to cause humanity massive illnesses and diseases, are the pharmaceutical companies owned by the elite, because they want world domination, one world government where they control everyone. The funny part is they can't control 7.5 or 7.6 billion people, but you reduce it right down, and that's where you can control. Because what you actually do by putting in the vaccines with the new nanotechnology, you're going to create what is called synthetic biology by wiping out the original bloodline of that human, and they will become synthetic biology. So back to the characteristics. And this will actually tie those two things up to what can eventuate in humanity's future, which is coming right now. It's already here. Those characteristics of anger, violence, joy, happiness, non-love, love, hatred, non-hatred, all the negative experiences, fear, non-fear, will be in the genetics of the man's sperm and within the blood of the mother, because that blood flows through that child as it grows in that 9 months. And everything the mother has experienced, be it negative or positive, and the grandparents and the great-grandparents are coming down the line within the blood, flowing through the child, which will form their character. Then into society, schools. Sometimes schools are the worst place for children to be. Yeah, they look good, but who's controlling the schools? Well, naturally, the education department. They can put in whatever they want. And at the moment, the education department is run by governments worldwide. And all those governments have become submissive by signing an agreement, handing over the sovereignty of that country, where one man, Tedros, who runs the World Health Organization, he controls the entire population of this planet. And that's a real problem, because he is not a man of empathy. He is not a man of heart. Those type of people are narcissists, and they love power. If you have a balanced person who has a loving heart and is full of empathy, you can allow that person to rule a country or an empire, because they have the goodwill of the people. There is not one government on this earth that has got the goodwill of the people. Why would a government actually sell off the rights of the population to a person like Tedros, who runs the World Health Organization? Doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense at all. Back to the actual characteristics. The child is now within the mother's womb, growing. And all the characteristics of the father's sperm and the mother's blood is welling and going around the entire system, impregnating as the organs grow. Those characteristics, which are cells, living cells, are inundated with all those characteristics in every organ inside the human body of that child. And every child that has been born on the planet for the last 928,000 years. The child grows and it's born. It's got its mother's love. It's got its father's love, if it's a happy relationship. But can you imagine, Michael, if it's not? So we come to the negative. The father doesn't want a child. The father's a druggo. The mother's a druggo. All the negative aspects of their life's experiences are now within that poor little child who is innocent. Forget the karma, but is innocent. But it's going to end up probably 80% of the time like the parents. And if the body is sick from the mother or the father with all these different ailments, that will come through the genetics and be instilled within the child. And in most situations, if you look around the world today, that poor child doesn't have a chance because it's going to think a certain way. It's going to experience life a certain way. If the father has no heart, and a lot of the girls take after the father, the child will grow up with no heart, no real feelings, because the father and the mother never understood what unconditional love was. What they understood was what the grandparents and the grandparents and the grandparents gave them, conditional love, because they've never experienced the love of a heart. A child should be born into this world with loving parents that have love for each other when that child is coming into the human world. But if it's not, then that child has got a flaw and it's never going to experience what it can't understand. And that's why the parents can't live a life of love, of joy, of real happiness, because it's been conditioned to think and act a certain way. And I've spoken about clones. A lot of the children end up as clones of the parents. Michael, since I've been on this planet, I have spoken to thousands of people over my physical lifetime, and so many of them admitted to me all they want to do is feel real love. And when I explain to them that it's within themselves to release, they don't understand. And when I ask them to put their hands over their chest, which is their heart center, and I explain about the heart center as well as the other main chakra centers, they start to cry. Men and women, they start to cry. And I think that's one of the most beautifulest things an individual as a human being can do. Because what it means, they have actually touched the essence of their heart. And their conditioning, all the negative aspects, are back here. But once they touch their heart, they then can look at all the negative things in their life and start to realize that most of it's not theirs. It's been passed down through the generations. It's like a father who goes at a young age and fights wars, like terrorists, for instance, and they fight all these terrible, ugly wars. And they grow up to about 40, then they have a child or 2 or 3. And suddenly you look at their children, they're 9 years old and they're carrying around a machine gun and they're willing to kill you. Why? Conditioning, hatred that's within the father and the mother. Being controlled by their emotions, which are negative. Never having feelings, never having empathy. No love. So they pass on all that disgusting energy onto that child. And they grow up. And their children grow up. And their children grow up. And we wonder why we have so many narcissists on this planet that don't actually know what real love is. All these families, all these cabal people, all these controllers are all narcissists that have never experienced real love of heart. That's why they're doing it. It's like a revenge. If they can't feel something that's so pure, they're going to turn to their emotions in a negative way, and they're going to allow it to fester like pus coming out of a pimple and waiting to burst. And they're the same. And they're going to do negative things to whoever they can. It's like you walk down the street and you can see a guy and the way he's walking, or a woman even, especially a young guy who's trying to deal with his emotions, but he has no idea how to. And if you look at him, that's enough to get him going. And all he wants to do is take out his hatred, his anger, frustration, out on whoever he can and hurt you badly. And all you were doing was smiling, or you wanted to say hello. And that's what you got, because they have no love. And that's why I push the word love so much. And I've said this a few times before, but let's spell love backwards. E-V-O-L. Evol. The oldest Hebrew on the planet in this language. Evol, meaning evil. So what we have, Michael, within us is evil and something so pure that wants to manifest outwardly, called love. And eventually, if we find that love, you will find evil will dissipate. If these evil narcissists could actually feel real love and compassion for any species, they would literally drop what they're doing. But no one has ever said anything. And that's why the only way is to literally bring them all together into one place and charge them with criminal offences for tyranny, for mass murder of over 20 million human beings so far on this planet from the vaccinations, because they are loaded with technology called nanotechnology from graphene oxide. And that is literally changing their blood structure, but also the nanotechnology instantly goes to the brain and it snips your memories because it's going to take over. That's what it wants. And what I found very interesting in reading something just the other day, I found out peanuts, all the different types of peanuts, nuts, like Brazil nuts, just normal peanuts, almonds. I can't think of the other ones at the moment, but macadamians. They all hold certain types of chemicals. And I've got to do some research again to find out what the chemicals are actually named, because some of these long words totally bewilder me. I can't pronounce them. But I want to find out and express that to the people who listen. It's been proven that nuts actually destroy spike protein. Now, how's that? Spike protein is what's killing humans and changing your DNA. So that's an interesting factor, isn't it? Now, when I say proven proven by people who don't go through the normal process of health departments and all that type of stuff. Doctors. Do you know how hard it is to trust the health department and doctors? If most people knew that they are forced to be quiet and keep giving the injections knowingly, that you may die. And that's the sad part. Knowingly. Now, this lady that I listened to the other day on an interview, I'm just trying to think of her name, but from New Zealand, and she was being interviewed by a radio station, I believe in Australia, called Xena something. I can't remember the last name. It was heart-wrenching to actually watch this video where she was interviewing a man who's a scientist, a fairly up high scientist in a very top position in, I believe, the health department, in some area of the health department in New Zealand. And when he actually saw the data, he became curious and he started researching it. And it shocked him. He cried and cried and cried. He couldn't believe that children and adults were being mass murdered. Because he found out that it's the vaccines, not COVID-19, because COVID-19 was created by the Americans, by the presidential Americans, I should say, and then patented and then actually given to China to actually release it. And that's why people were getting sick, like a flu. But I believe COVID-19, my personal opinion, comes from SARS. And SARS is also patented by the American government. So anything that has a patent on it, that tells me that it was never a reality of its own virus or bacteria. It was created by man. Now, why would man do that? And yet there are facilities in America and around the world that are either underground or in some massive building that have produced so many negative bacterias and viruses that would literally wipe out humanity within 3 days. They're that powerful. And they've been doing this and spending the human population's tax money, but not telling the people. The funny thing, Michael, is, going back to the characteristics very soon, the funny thing is, if we look at it and say to ourselves, we are the people, we are the power, we put in a government to actually help us live better, enjoy life. But no government in Australia since 1974 has actually been doing that. They've all been against us. There was a guy by the name of Tony Ryan, who's a journalist, who spent years creating the evidence, which now became a book, but not allowed to be published, called The Australia Fights Back. You should look it up. People should look that up. Australia Fights Back. And he tells the true story of what happened in 1974. And this adds to what we are talking about, where it began. But it actually goes back to the First World War. And I'll go into that in a minute. But in 1974, a man by the name of Bob Hawke and Paul Keating, unfortunately, Bob Hawke is no longer alive, but Paul Keating is, and he should be arrested for criminal charges, for mass murder, for tyranny, because he and Bob Hawke signed Australia, called the Australian government, as a corporation, a company in Washington, D.C. in 1974. Basically sold our sovereign to America. But in my mind, in my own opinion, no corporation has got the legal right to run a country like Australia. They just don't have it. But no one is willing to challenge that. If lawyers came together They could challenge that and remove the present government because they are illegal. And they are now involved with the World Health Organization, like another 194 governments, and they are all doing exactly what the Australian government is doing, building all these camp centres around Australia. There's one in Toowoomba. And the funny thing is, we had a video where this tradesman who was hired to build these things, these portables, and he sort of said, hang on, why is a gas pipe going through an air conditioner? Well, you've got to ask yourself a very, very deep and personal question. Why would a government put in a gas pipe into an air conditioner? And you know what it does in my mind to what my father, Jaroslav Harambura, told me? He explained everything to me about what the Germans did. And it was the present day elite criminals, like these families that I mentioned, who were back then in Germany. And they literally controlled Hitler by giving him the money to create a Second World War. They did that to kill off people, and they killed off by murdering over 69 million. But what's interesting, and my father he had no choice or he would be gassed. He had to work and remove bodies of thousands of babies, thousands and thousands of young children, and thousands of mothers and fathers and elderly people that were conned little by little by little. Just what all the governments of the world are doing to the people right now. Deceit, lies. Now, they were trying to get in Australia a law out about disinformation. The people don't give out disinformation. They want the truth. The people who are giving out the disinformation are the governments, because they control the media, because Murdoch owns the media, and he does exactly what they tell him, because he's part of the entire deceit, the entire setup of becoming a one world government. Now, going back to characteristics, or before I go back, I must say this. I meant to say this. My father told me that he had to go in and load up all the dead bodies. And then he found out how they did it. How did they get away with just killing all these people? The campsites were created so the other ones in other camps would not see them. They were told they have to come over and have a shower every so many days or whatever it may have been. So they went over there and they were all humiliated because they all had to stand naked together with all their children and everything and have showers. But the problem was, Michael, they weren't showers. When you turned the tap on, you couldn't turn it off. And what came out of it was deadly gas. And all you could hear was the screams and the cries and the banging on the walls to please, please open the doors. This is my children, my child. My father cried. Every night he cried to go to sleep because he saw the look on the children's faces, babies, of being gassed and dead. And that would be one of the most horrific, experiences that anyone could go through in such a negative way. And a lot of people had to do that. And if they didn't, they were gassed. You had no rights as a civilian whatsoever. Today, Michael, it's the Nazis who are doing it again. That's what I call them. I call it Nazism. They're doing exactly what Hitler did back in the Second World War. They're creating situations to kill us in a different way and to gas us through these so-called campsites all around Australia, all around the world. And you've got to ask yourself why. And why aren't the people standing up? Why aren't the people rebelling? The people have to go to war against governments because they can't allow this to happen. Because if they do, humanity will have no rights. Everything will be taken away. Your children, your house, your cars, you'll own nothing. And you'll be synthetic biology. You'll no longer be human. This is happening on a low scale. They have a plan laid out nearly 100 years ago. And they've been doing little bits and pieces right throughout our history up until now. And now it's like they're going full bore. And these people have to be stopped. If we go back to the characteristics, all those families that I mentioned, their children are the narcissists from the previous lifetime. They have learned how to be reborn through the family line over and over and over again. It's like a murderer. If a person's a vicious murderer, that could go through history. But when they come back, they'll be a murderer again and again and again because they can't help it. It's conditioned within their memory, within their cellular memory structure. And it just keeps coming out because they've never learned about compassion. They've never learned about unconditional love. They've never learned about empathy. And the only way that can be halted is if they face, all of them, criminal charges and be executed or be hung in public. So people can say, you are the so-and-sos that killed our children, our mothers, our fathers, our wives, our husbands, our uncles, whoever. That is the only way we as humanity will start to come back into a species and learn how to become a human being, not to stay as a human animal, because we don't know how to open up our hearts, because we're not taught. And we're dumbed out by these narcissists who are trying to control not only the world, but us as well. Now, this guy in this book under Anna Maria, she sends out emails. And yes, she's got it all copyright, but I'm only mentioning Todd Callender. He actually opened up and explained everything. Now, if anyone is going to look up, I think I've got it here somewhere. You can write to Anna Maria, and I have to spell her last name, Mihalcea. She's an MD, a PhD from Humanity United Now. And she helps run it. She's part of it. And she releases information. And just recently, it's called the Weaponization of Public Health Existing Legal Framework for Global Depopulation, presented by Todd Callender to the government of the Republic of Croatia. Now, he's been a lawyer for over 30 years and has worked in many fields, even worked for the communist government, has an advisor for other things, and he's literally telling how they created everything. Now, I'm not going to go into that side of it, but the one thing he does say that really hit me, and I'll tell you the reason why. I've mentioned this to you, Michael, on a few occasions, but I'm going to mention it again. Back in 1979, I had a dream, a really strange dream about the depopulation of planet Earth. And I saw this green mist. And when it literally went around a person, it ate the flesh right down to the bone. And I was horrified by that, to dream that. I never had dreams like that. So I woke up that morning and I said to myself, wow, it's really in my brain, my mind. So I wrote a film script called The World Conspiracy. Wow, I finished it just over 3 months. And I wrote it as a film script, which really intrigued me because I've never had that knowledge whatsoever in how to do it. I even decided after I finished, I said, wow, this could make a movie. And I approached Warner Brothers in Sydney. I approached a few different companies that were doing private films. And I had no luck. And a few of them said to me, oh, you're going to have a hard time selling that in Australia. I said, why is that? Well, it's more like James Bond. And a movie at the moment in Australia can do anything from 1 million to 3 million. And that was back in 1979 or say 1980. So I sort of said, okay. And then I thought about Jackie Chan years on. So I sent him a script. And he wrote back to me and he said to me, no, it's not my type of thing. And that was it. Never heard from him again. So I put it aside. But to give you an idea, it's about a centre in Alice Springs that literally exists and goes down under the ground too, and is all fenced off so the public can't get to it. And the Americans have been experimenting there for years. They have a big lease. And it was a centre I decided to set up with different characteristics who run it, and also that he finds out about this actual, how would you say, experiment in how to destroy the human race. And the only ones to survive would be the ones they call intelligent and the elite, and they would be in underground facilities or in mountain facilities, different places around the world, and they all exist. I found out later. And they would release this substance on Earth, and it would grow to a proportion where it would kill every form of physical life, from animal to bird to insects to humans. And it would take anything between 50 and 60 years for it to vaporize eventually and allow humans to come out of their facility and repopulate the Earth and run the Earth they want to under one new world order, in a sense. I didn't use that terminology, but I found out only a few years later in reading a little diagram, reading a little newspaper talking about there are those that want a new world order and run the entire country or the entire world. So I thought to myself, wow. So I've decided that I'm going to rewrite that film script into a book form with the dialogue, the storyline, and the description, because people might find it really interesting. And there's a lot of action. I mean, a lot of action. I won't even go into it, but I put a lot of action and dramatics into it. And also it's a bit of a thriller at the same time. So it made me think, why would I create something like that when I'm not even a writer at that time? Never even thought about being a writer. And yet it comes out. Michael, we have within us what is called the knowing. And the knowing can be activated even by a dream. Even our creativeness, our mind, can be activated by a dream experience, even by a physical experience that is so lovingly overwhelming to us. And it can bring forth such positivity where we can create magnificent paintings, magnificent songs full of love, magnificent books full of love, whatever, a world full of love. But these people at the moment, all these negative narcissist families, they don't want that. They want world domination. Now, the interesting thing, what this guy, Todd Callender, revealed, they don't want to depopulate 40 or 50%. It's written in their plan because he wouldn't have said it. They want to depopulate 7 billion human people, which would only leave, if my figures are correct, about 500 million, maybe 600 million. That's a lot of people to depopulate. And then you've got to ask yourself the reason why. Why would anyone want to depopulate 7 billion people off the planet, which is basically 92 to 95% of the human race? And then it hit me. Wow. Now, a lot of people won't believe this, and a lot of people may. There is a guy by the name of David Icke who did seminars for years and years and years around the world. He even did several in Australia. And he told about the Illuminati. I'm going to even say that right.
Illuminati.
Thank you, mate. And he told me about aliens. And I discovered who the aliens were. And they're green reptilians. And they're called the Zerasines. And they're an alien race that want to take over planet Earth. And what they do, they shapeshift or shadow a human that they specifically pick. One person especially was Obama. They shadow him, where they exist between the third dimension, which is human physical world, and the fourth dimension, which also is spirit world. But in between that, there are many different vibrations or frequencies. They exist slightly higher in vibration, but mentally they are retarded.
They exist in that vibration thanks to their technology.
Exactly. In their technology. They don't do it from a spiritual aspect because they don't have any spiritual aspect whatsoever. They have no empathy. They don't understand love. They don't understand feelings. All they understand is the grey. They live very grey. Their buildings are all grey. Their planet is not barren, but a lot of it's barren. And they have parts where there's trees and bushes and all that type of stuff and sand and everything. But they don't have what we have. And they want it. The Zerasines want what we have. Now, why would they be shadowing or shapeshifting, say, politicians or somebody in high places? Now, there's a saying that the Rothschilds are satanic, and they're a force of negative energy that is from an alien source that a planet blew up and their energy still exists. And they are now here controlling all the high figures throughout the world and bringing them into their way of thinking through satanic rituals. Now, that's an interesting factor. That will blow a lot of people's minds. The funny part is, if we go back to the characteristics, all these people throughout humanity's history, the last 928,000 years, they have been reincarnating over and over and over and over, right throughout our history, into positions of power. Always in high, rich families or positions. And today, they're even stating, this Todd Calendar, that this guy who runs the World Health Organization is the most powerful person on planet Earth. And yet, he doesn't even have the feelings of having a heart. He is basically a narcissist who runs the world the way he sees and does whatever he wants. And these governments all around the world are allowing it. Well, I still haven't come up with the answer to that question because it literally stuns me that governments who are put into power to serve the people, because the people are the power who put them in. And yet why aren't we standing up for our rights now, straight away, and saying no more, enough is enough. You cannot kill people, children. And yet, as we said in once before, over 8 million children and babies disappear each year. Well, we know where they go. They're not dead. Only a very small portion are murdered through rituals, cannibalism, and the sex trade. Wow, who runs them? Well, we don't need to really ask that question because we know it's the elite. And that's the really sad part. So the characteristics right throughout their human evolution is negative. And they're trying to put all that negativity onto the rest of humanity. And it is working, because we are now forming more pedophiles than ever, more narcissists than ever, more violent people than ever. I mean, the Australian government just released, I think it's over 100 refugees into our public who have murdered, raped, molested, and done other horrible things like robbery, bashings, all that. You got to ask yourself, well, why would any government do that? Because they've been doing it for hundreds of years. That's how they control people, through fear. And people today, Michael, have more fear than they've ever had in human history. We are literally in a war against the tyrants, against the mass murderers, against the pedophilias, against greed, lust, all the sickness that these entities have created throughout their own evolution. And now they are trying to place it upon us. And eventually they will, if we don't stand up and do something about it and start looking for the evidence like so many beautiful people are standing up and doing. I mean, this poor man in New Zealand who's a scientist, who's on the data side of it, he did a live face interview. And the next morning, I believe from what I read and heard, his house was raided and everything was taken. And I feel he disappeared. He may be charged and then released. I have no idea because I haven't heard. And that's what they do. And have a guess who's doing it? Yeah, the police are coming because they're told to by the hierarchies, by the tyrants. Because they're saying, you naughty boy, you gave out all that information. You've set us back another 2 years. And they don't want that. They want control. Our DNA is corrupted because of beliefs, fears, and conditioning. And that's what we are passing on to our children. Yes, there are many who are passing on positive emotions, positive characteristics, but there are many more that are passing on negative stuff onto their children. And they grow up with the same characteristics of fear, of hate, of conditioning, which should not be. I'm going to say this. I'm a great believer in love. I'm a great believer in helping and being a person who can pass on knowledge freely. Because I think knowledge is what sets us free, because it activates the deepest essence of our being. The fear, all it does is create fear. And yet fear, Michael, is only a word. It has no power. What it does have is the fear itself, which is energy that you're passing on to create that fear, which then becomes your belief. And that's the sad part. Now, we have to admit as a parent, and only a parent can feel it. People who don't have children and who get older and they still don't have children, they don't feel what a parent feels because they haven't experienced it. It's like if I said to you, Michael, when I had this lung cancer thing that I created through my own stupidity, not smoking, by the way, but creating it, if I said to you, do you understand what I felt? And if you said to me, yes, you would be lying or just trying to feel good about it. Unless you as an individual experience what somebody else is saying or in a different format, you don't truly understand what that emotion was all about. And one of the big issues We live in emotion more so than we live as a feeling being. And what we need to do is dissolve all the negative aspects that have been passed down through all the generations into the nothingness and let it go. Yes, it'll be in our memory, cellular structure, but not to be drawn on because of the way we feel in this moment emotionally, because that's a negative. We need to feel with our feelings and become a loving human being because we are so unique in the universe. Yes, we've had a violent history, absolutely. 157,000 violent wars, over 19 billion slaughtered in such horrible ways. That is nothing to be proud of. But we need to change and dissolve it. And we need to grow in balance within ourselves and have no longer the emotions of negativity, of fear, of hatred, of jealousy, of anger and violence, of rape and murder, of control and domination. We need to become balanced within ourselves and pass on that balanced energy to the loving children that deserve it, to grow up with love, not with the past, because that's what's happening, growing up with the past. And that's the sad part, Michael. And there are some very easy ways of doing it. When my new book comes out, called Entanglement, The Long Journey Home, there'll be a book also coming out which is revamped called Entrapment, The Pathway to Freedom. A smaller volume, but worth reading because it will help you understand the difference between emotion and feelings, the past and the present, and how the past becomes the present. And because of our fears, our negative emotions, we create our future. But we also create our children's future by passing the negative aspects of our existence through our genetics onto our children. And that's not right. We need to learn to love unconditionally. And we need to remove all these narcissists with very strong prejudice and remove them off the planet. And that way we can grow as a species. And I can say that with 100% truth. I've seen it on other worlds where the evil is removed immediately and the good begins to grow and the changes then come into action.
Very good, Kuntarkis. Well, the body of text that you were talking about by Todd Callender is actually an email that we can send to others if they want to contact us at kuntarkis@gmail.com. It's called The Weaponization of Public Health, Existing Legal Framework for Global Depopulation by Todd Callender. Do you agree, Kuntarkis? They can email us and we can...
Absolutely agree to that.
Yeah, it's 19 pages they can read.
If they email us, we'll actually send that out.
Excellent.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else to sum it up, Kuntarkis?
Always remember this in your heart when you start to develop your heart. Truth is truth. Illusion is illusion. And illusion is created from lies. 100%. And that's not the way to instill within a society. And that's quotes from my father, Yakas Kardas.
Right. Thank you very much, Kuntarkis, for all that you've shared. If you like I said before, if you'd like to contact us, email kuntarkis@gmail.com. Also, you can find more on Kuntarkis on his website, etcconsciousness.com, including his books and the other things he can speak about as a speaker. And if you'd like to have a private consultation with him, you can contact him through there as well. That's it for now. My name is Michael Yon. Thanks so much for listening and stay tuned for more.